This is Mr. A, and I'm going to show you the way to turn these different hundreds chart grids into decimals, fractions, and equivalent fractions. The way that you can start is you can start looking at the hundreds grid. Let's look at the one that is right over here. If I can just get my pen to work. There we go. We're going to look at the one right over here. If we look, we can see that there is one column with 10 squares in it. And we know that in our hundreds grid we have columns that have 10 squares and rows that have 10 squares each. And that there are a total of 100 squares in each grid. So let's have a look here. The way that we can make a decimal is we can count the number of squares that are shaded in. So in this case we have 10 squares that are shaded in. And so that means I can make a decimal value like so. It would be 0.10 because I have 10 squares shaded in. Now, if I was going to make a simple fraction from that, I could say that I have 10 squares. That's our numerator. That's the number of squares that we have shaded in over 100 squares. And that's the denominator. That's the number of squares that are inside of our hole over there. And if we count again, we have 100 squares in a 100 grid. So we get the 10 on top, the numerator, by counting the number of squares that are shaded in, and we get the 100, the denominator, from the number of squares that are in the entire grid, and that's our hole there. Now, if I want to make an equivalent fraction for 10 over 100, I can do that in a couple of ways. One of the easiest ways to do that is just to half the numbers on the top and on the bottom. So let's try to do that. If we have 10 and we half that, we know that half of 10 is 5. And on the bottom, we also have to half the denominator, and we know that half of 100 is 50. There we go. Now, we can also do that by just crossing out the zeros. So if I do this, that gives us 1 over 10. Now, another way that we can find this equivalent fraction, 1 over 10, is by looking at the hundreds grid and simply saying to ourselves, well, look, I have one column that has 10 squares in it out of 1, 2, 3, 4, and all the way up to 10. I have 10 columns here, all the way up to 10 columns here with 10 squares, and I have 1 out of 10 that is shaded in. That's probably the easiest way to make an equivalent fraction, just by looking at our hundreds grid over here. Okay? Let's try to do the same thing with some of these other hundreds grids that I have below. If we look at our friend down here, we notice that we have 3 different rows that have 10 colored in, and then we have down here, on top of that, we have 3 more squares that are colored in. So that means that in total we have 10, 20, 30 squares, and then 1, 2, and 3. That means that we have 33 squares. So that our decimal value would be 0.33, because we have 33 squares out of 100 squares here that are shaded in. And that's how we get the decimal. Now, the easiest way to make a fraction from that is to say that we have 33 squares out of 100 squares. So our numerator on top, that one over there, it comes from the squares that we've shaded in, right over there. And this number down here comes from our hundreds grid. That's our denominator. And we have that 100 there because the whole hundreds grid has 100 different squares in it. Okay? Now, if we look at, let me just take away some of these different marks because it's getting a little bit messy. So I'm going to take those away. Oh, we don't want to take those away. If we look at our hundreds grid, we can see that there is about 1/3 of the grid that is covered by but is covered by the parts that are colored in. So what we can do is we can easily make a fraction from that. We can say that, oh, about 1/3 of the grid is colored in. And that would probably be the easiest way to make a fraction from that, just by looking and trying to make a connection with other types of fractions that we've seen. Because if I draw lines across here, we can see that, yeah, about, and my lines are a little bit messy, but I could have made them a little bit straighter. Maybe let's do that again. We can see that roughly speaking, the hundreds grid is divided into 3 different parts, and that's how we get thirds. We get the number 1, which is our numerator from the top part. That's one piece, and we get the number 3 from the fact that there are 1, 2, and 3 different pieces. And that was a really messy 3. Let me try that again. 3 different pieces there. Okay? So that's how we get 1/3. Now, there are other ways that we can make equivalent fractions from 1/3, and that's by doubling. So if I double 1, I get 2, and that gives us our numerator on top. And if I double 3, well, I get 6, because 3 plus 3 is 6. That's also the same, because I know that if I skip count by 2s, 2, 4, 6, there are 3 groups of 2 in 6, and I only have 1 2 here. So that's the same as saying as I have 1/3 here. Let's go on to the last hundreds grid that we have here for our demonstration. And this is probably the hardest one to make equivalent decimals with, but we can still easily make a decimal using the same strategies that we were using. If we look at this hundreds grid here, we have 5 different squares that are colored in out of 100. That means we can say that we have 0 decimal 0.05, because we have 5 squares that are shaded in out of 100. Or, as we were learning when we were talking about decimals last unit, we can say that we have 5 hundredths. Or another way that we can say it is that we have 5 cents. And in fact, if we're thinking about dollars and cents, would be this up here, where we have the 0.33, would be 33 cents. And this up here would be 10 cents. And those are a little bit messy. There we go. Okay, so now the easiest fraction that we can make for our friend down here is this. We can say that we have 5. Oh, that's also very messy. We can have 5 over 100. And the top number, the numerator, comes from, again, the 5 squares that are shaded in. And again, the bottom number, the denominator, comes from our hundreds grid, which has 100 different squares in it. Now, I'm going to connect what we're doing here to dollars and cents. We know that we have a special coin that is worth 5 cents, and it looks something like this, only it's got a circle around it. We have a 5-cent coin. Now, if we skip count by 5, first we have the 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Ooh. Let me try that again. Let's try from down here. 50, 65, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, and we have 100 over there. I must have missed one row. If we count all of the different lines that I've made across here, we have 20 different lines, 20 different groups of 5 inside of our 100. And that, what I'm really trying to show you here is that we have 20 5-cent coins in total in our 100, in our hundreds grid. So that also means that we can look at making a fraction with these groups of 5. We have one group of 5 out of 20 different groups of 5 that are colored in. So what we can do is we can make a fraction with that, because I have one group of 5 colored in our grid. And if we look here and we count these different lines that I've made here, and here, we have 20 groups in total. And that means that 5 over 100 is the same as saying 1 over 20. Okay? Now, that's all we're going to be doing for now. Feel free to ask me any questions that you have about this. This is stuff that we've already covered in class, and I hope that this video was of some help. Thank you.